this is what's possible through real estate. And so obviously I think that we should be doing it too. So we're going to talk about lots of different creative opportunities and things like that in the next hour. But before we start, who are you and why are you here? Who wants to be brave and go first? Share your name and why you chose to come to this specific class.
I'll go. We have decided this is the year that we are going to buy our first investment property.
Nice. Love it. This year's almost over, just fair warning. But
sorry, 2021 is the year.
Sounds good. Who else?
I'll go. I met earlier with you in a group about investing before COVID, and then COVID kind of put a wrinkle in everything, but this was going to be the year we were going to buy an investment property, and could still be, but I definitely want to revisit that idea and get some more knowledge on how the best way I can do that for me and my family, eventually for my kid and whatever else. So as a means to more wealth.
Yeah, for sure. Stephen, for you and also for Ashley and anybody else that wants to jump in, when you say buy an investment property, are you talking about a fix and flip? Are you talking about owner occupied flip? Are you talking about a rental that you hang on to for cash flow? What kind of investment property are you talking about?
I think for us, it'd probably be a rental. I don't think we want to do the fix and flip route necessarily. And it could be even renting our house out and buying a different property and just renting this one out.
Gotcha.
My answer is the same as Stephen, like exactly.
Yeah, cool. There's nothing I enjoy more in this industry than helping people build significant wealth through real estate. It's addicting. Like when you see I'll bore you with stories throughout this whole time, I'm sure, but when you see I had a couple 6 years ago that had $250,000 in student loans, and they bought this house in Arvada that they barely qualified for. I don't know how you qualify for a house with $250,000 in student loans. And we sold it 2 months ago for $460 or $470 or something, and they paid off all their student loans, and now they are debt free because they bought real estate. Ingrid Hall is on this. I mean, I worked with Ingrid and her husband Travis for years, investing in real estate and building significant wealth, and getting to be a bystander in the process of them building an empire. It's incredibly gratifying, but at some point we've got to translate it to us. We've got to be building this for ourselves and not just helping other people build wealth through real estate, right? So how about one or two more thoughts while you're here, who you are? Ingrid, if you wanted to share anything on top of that, feel free, but that is, I don't know, anybody else? Why you chose to come to this class?
For me, it's any chance I could get to learn more. I'm in the same boat as everybody else, the long-term rental game. Might be a year or two out, but any chance I could learn.
Totally. John, were you starting to share something up there?
Yeah, sorry, Dustin, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm John Beasley. I've invested in fix and flips the last 4 years, and as kind of Dave's story there, I wish I had kept them so that I could sell them now with all the equity. I've seen a couple of them go back on the market with another $100,000 or $200,000 above what I sold them for. So
For sure.
looking at something that I can buy and keep for a while, could be rentals or just cash flow or the equity buildup. So a lot of different options when you start getting into real estate.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Awesome. Well, let's jump in. I mean, we're going to talk about lots of different things today. I was going to start by just giving you like a quick 3 to 5 minute rundown of our story, my wife and I story over the last 8 years or so. Some of the things we've done well and not well, and then talk about the 4 questions that I think everybody should be asking as we go into maybe a listing appointment or some sort of property that could be a potential. Types of opportunities to look for, and then ways to finance those opportunities, and then how to get started with some sort of investment focus. So those are kind of the 5 things we're going to talk about. And I probably should have some sort of like PowerPoint to show you, and here's all the things that we're talking about. I have none of that. So I'm just going to talk, and hopefully you're taking good notes, and hopefully you get something out of it. So quick rundown. So my wife and I bought our first house in 2011. I was teaching during the days and stocking grocery shelves at Whole Foods at night and making very little money at either. And somehow they qualified us to buy a $200,000 house in Lakewood. And so we bought a $170,000 house and did a 203K mortgage, rolling $30,000 of work ahead of close or ahead of move in into that property. And so we closed for $200,000. And 2 years later to the day, by this point, I was working in real estate. I realized that I could sell that house for $260,000, and that $60,000 of cash would be completely tax-free. I wouldn't have to pay the government a penny on that cash. And it became really addicting, and we sold it to the day. I mean, we let the people move in 5 days before closing, so that because they had to, but we couldn't close until November 2nd of 2013 or whatever it was. And so then we rolled out in the next house, and then we did it again for 2 years, and then we did it again for 2 years, and we built this. We put $9,500 down. I think was the original. It was a 3.5% down FHA 203K mortgage, and we could barely scrape together $9,000. And then fast forward 6-7 years later, that $9,000 was probably $600,000-$700,000 in cash that had been rolled and built into this snowball that kept growing and growing, all because we had sort of gamed the system of this, buy a house, fix it up, move 2 years later every 2 years. And so that's kind of how we got started in investing in real estate. And then that opened up other doors for other rental properties and things like that. And so that's kind of what I'm going to build on for the next little while. And so that, to me, I mean, that's one of the things we're going to talk about, is opportunities that people could be taking advantage of just with their own owner-occupied flip, which is what I call every 2 years moving into your next property that you've flipped. We try every property we move into, we try to stay 2 years, and a couple of you know us well, know that we have a hard time now staying the full 2 years. And so the longest house my wife and I have ever lived in was 2.5 years in Littleton, and that was a challenge. So then fast forward to today. I mean, we actually got out of a lot of stuff beginning of last year, middle of last year. We sold several and kind of saw some writing on the wall and thought it was probably a good time to just calm down a little bit. And so we are not doing a whole lot right now. There's one rental in Aurora, and then we co-purchased an Airbnb that is just a cash flow and use here and there kind of property. So that's all we're involved in right now. And so I might not be the poster child of the person that's like super, super invested in real estate right now. So that's by way of fair warning and disclaimer. So just so you know, and feel free to jump in at any time, but at the end, we'll stop early and have time for questions. And there's probably several things we'll mention during kind of flippantly, like we did this type of loan, or we pursued this kind of financing or whatever. And feel free to ask for clarifications on any of that. But none of those are stupid questions. It's all stuff that we all learned somewhere along the way, what it is. And this is your chance. So, okay, 4 questions. I really believe that one of the best ways that any of you and that I could build an investment arm of our net worth is by taking more listings, which is going to sound crazy and stupid and not helpful. But trust me, the more listing appointments I go on, the more opportunities to help a seller sell their house, the more opportunities I have to buy, and oftentimes the more deals I'm exposed to that I can say yes to. And so at least 3 times I've been sitting across the table from a seller who wanted to sell their house, and somehow, some way, at the end of the day, that house was mine. And none of them that I live in, they weren't, houses that I bought to move into. And so I think one of the best things we can do if we want to grow an investment arm of our wealth is to go on more and more and more listing appointments, which we're going to talk about. But every time I go into a listing appointment, there should be 4 questions that I'm asking myself when I'm sitting across from that seller. And they're in order. There are 4 questions that have to go in this order. And I think that more than anything, hopefully you come away from this quick conversation here thinking differently about where your properties could come from or how to invest in real estate, and also thinking bigger about what's possible and available to you. So the first question I always ask, and always should be asking going into these appointments, is, can I buy it? Do I want to buy this? Should I buy this? Even if it's a seller that's having me over to talk to them about selling their house on the market, one of the first questions I should always be going in with is, should I buy this? And obviously, we're talking about different prices at this point. Any listing appointment I go into, I like to have 2 numbers for them. The first one is the on market, list the house and sell it full market value, maybe a $400,000 house, let's say. And then the cash quick close price, which sometimes means me, sometimes means an investor, sometimes means Zillow offers or Open Door or whoever, but telling them that another option for you would be $325 cash. And so some people, depending on their situation, we had one last year that we ended up buying that she had health issues and she needed to be to Utah within like weeks. And so the numbers, I think she was about 300 if she hit the market. And I told her 260 cash, 260 quick close. We actually ended up financing that one. But if you're going into every listing appointment with two scenarios, you never know what they're going to choose. Some people, it just might make more sense for them to be cash, quick close, and get out of this thing. And so, and then keep in mind too, at that point, I mean, if somebody says, I like the cash option, you're not agreeing to buy it. You're just agreeing to, if you believe enough in the number, and hopefully your numbers are good enough that you're confident that you're not overpaying for it, you're just locking it down to either close on it or take it to somebody else that's going to close on it and pay you a finder's fee. Or if the 300,000, let's take the scenario, $400,000 house. If I am looking at a $400,000 house on the market and I lock it down at 325 because that seller says, just give me the cash and get out of here, I need to close in 2 weeks. If I sign a contract, an assignable contract at 325, and I take it to several other investors and say, you can have this property for 335, I could have people within a few days, several people ready to go that would buy that property for 335, and I'm not actually closing on it. And I could either wholesale it, which is essentially assigning that contract to them, or I could just broker the deal and the two of them that person could buy it for 335, and the commission built into that is that $10,000 finder's fee that's coming to me. And so when I go into an appointment like this, just because I'm giving them a number of what a cash investor would buy it at, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm the one that's buying that property. But it certainly means that I might be the one that's buying that property. So I think the first question, the first thing you need to know going into it is, could I buy this? Should I buy this? You might be buying it to wholesale it. You're locking it down to wholesale it. You might be purchasing it as a rental. You might be purchasing it for you to live in. There's a lot of reasons to purchase it, but I think every listing appointment we go into, it's, can I buy it? Question number two is, could I control it, or should I control it? And controlling it means essentially that wholesale conversation we have, locking it down at the price so that you then can go find the buyer for it. And so you might be wholesaling it. You might be brokering it as the finder's fee in the middle. So should I buy it, or could I buy it? Should I control it? Number three, should I list it? And so I think the third question that we should ask going into these appointments is, do I actually want to list this property? And then of course, number four, which would be the last option, is should I wholesale it or should I refer it? One way or another, when I leave that appointment, I want to be involved in that listing somehow. I either want to be buying it, I want to be controlling it for somebody else, I want to be listing it so that we can go market it, or I want to be referring it to somebody else that could better service it than I could. Different area, different price point, different, whatever it might be. So obviously today we're talking mostly about that first one. But I think going into the conversation, we need to be thinking differently about why we're sitting across that living room table and not judging so much going in about what they want to accomplish. Because we could be going into a really nasty divorce situation where they don't want to mess with it. Or we could be going into a health situation. We have a seller right now who's right in the middle of chemo and just does not have the ability to mess with this stuff. I mean, there's 1,000 reasons why somebody could be selling their house. And for us to go in with this proud assumption that they're only interested in top dollar, I mean, it's just not always the case. So the amount of sales that Zillow offers and OfferPad and whatever all these companies are taking right now is evidence that buyers often don't really care nearly, or sellers often don't care nearly as much about highest net as we think. We had some friends a month ago, 2 months ago, selling in Colorado Springs, and they were about to sign an offer from Zillow Offers. And they sent me the details and they said, we just don't want to mess with showings. We don't do all these things. And I said, you guys are crazy. That's like $60,000 less than your house is worth. The 380 or so is what we could sell it for. They were giving them about 300 after fees. And I told them, I mean, it's my sister-in-law's sister. So I don't know what the relationship is, but it was too close for me to buy it because it would just be weird. Like, I'm buying your house to make money on it. And they just wanted to be done. And so they sold it to Zillow because at the end of the day, they have young kids and they just wanted to not mess with selling their house. And so lots of times that's what we're going to run into, is people that would much rather, if the numbers work, they would much rather just sell it. So before we move on, any questions on any of those for the question of yourself going into a listing appointment of, is this even possible for me personally to buy? Okay, let's move on. So all of the ones that we've ended up in, I mean, they go different directions, but it's always started with being a listing focused broker. And so one of them we bought already had a tenant in it. And so we just inherited the tenant, Jean. She's been in there for 7 years and she's still there and she will probably be there for the rest of her life. And that's just what we bought, was that scenario. One of them was a flip. One of them was, the other one was a flip. The owner occupant flip, though, that I'm going to talk about first. I mean, that's what my wife and I have done the most of. And that's where we're buying a property, giving it, pretty small lipstick stuff before we move in, carpet, paint, countertops, maybe. And then 2 years later, we're selling it tax-free for the profit. Then we're moving on to the next one. I think a lot of us in this room, just looking around, like we might be a little past the house hack phase of our lives. But I think a lot of brokers should consider a house hack model where you're buying a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex. You're buying it owner occupied, so you're getting a much better interest rate, and you're living in one while you rent out the other three. I mean, I don't think that that's nearly as lucrative in Denver as it used to be. And it's probably not as possible for people that are more like middle of their career or middle of life and on. It's just more difficult, but I think it's definitely a potential. My favorite, though, so the one that I think that we as a broker community should be looking for the most are these lipstick flips that, to me, it's like a no-brainer to purchase an on-market home that's been sitting for a while, that's usually, it's got some cosmetic issues that are keeping people from buying it, and we're securing it at the right time of year. Does anybody know off the top of your head what the least expensive day of the year to close on a property is? Any suggestions? Guesses?
Was it Christmas?
It's a good guess. Brinkley, any other guesses?
January for 500.
It's a good guess. It's a good guess. All right, Brinkley was a day off, so we'll just stop it there. But December 26th is the least expensive day of the year to close on a property. And so it's stuff that's going under contract late November, early December, because sellers are getting pretty desperate at that point, and they're just saying, just get it gone. I don't want to wait until March, and so I'm just going to sell it for this lower offer today to close it after Christmas. And lots of people just want to get it done before the end of the year for tax purposes or just to be done and move on. But I think it's a great opportunity for us to be finding deals in November that are going to close before the end of the year, knowing the seasonality of the market that we see every year, right? So if I buy a house, let's take this one that we did this past winter. If we bought a house for $260 is what we bought it for. And I can almost guarantee, we bought it in November or something like that. I can almost guarantee that if we wait until March, where our price is going to be compared to where they are in November. I saw Steven's thumb. Well, guys, see some thumbs and fingers up. Exactly. I mean, almost anything that I buy in November, I can bet, it's a gamble. Obviously, it's a risk. Any investment is a risk. I can almost bet that come March, there's going to be a lot more buyers out there, and there's going to be a lot more demand for this property than there is right now that's been sitting on the market, or this one was off market that we bought. But one of my favorite opportunities is just something you're slowly fixing over the winter. So you close on it December 26th, and for the next month, you've got carpet coming in, you've got countertops and carpet, paint, countertops, maybe a front door. I mean, but my delusion or my belief is that we could always take the commission that's being paid and reinvest it in the property and put no more money into it. And so that $260,000 house, what's that commission? Maybe $7,000 total. I can take that $7,000 and it can probably go for carpet, paint, and countertops, and maybe a couple of appliances, and put nothing else into it and still just be into that property for $260,000. And that's a $325,000 property all day. You could do this every winter. I mean, every November, you could pick up a property that just needs some light cosmetic stuff that you're taking a month or 2 months to do. And then you're doing some pre-listing marketing, you're getting people excited about. And, but I think one thing to keep in mind too, though, that this is not something I was planning on talking about, but at least two of these that we've done, the value of being the one that's created the opportunity and then controlled it has been that we can decide who we want to help make this home possible. I mean, we are in a tough market right now, and people are very grateful when we are able to help them find a home. And so the two of the families I'm thinking of, like, they wouldn't have found another house. Like, they didn't have a chance of actually beating out. We helped one through a CHAFA down payment assistance program, and then they bought the house for $40,000 less than it was worth because they were renters that we liked, that we wanted to help make homeowners. And sometimes investing just gives you the ability to affect more change and be more of have more impact in someone's life than just selling the house anyways. And so one of the things I love about being the person that's actually doing the deal is that you can actually have some sort of input in who ends up with it too. And so that's a side note. I was just thinking about that with the lipstick flip idea, but And so I think just keeping in mind the seasonality too. So obviously this year's a little weird because we have no idea really what March is going to look like right now, right? I mean, we think we do, but we don't fully understand. But so who knows? I mean, I'd be a little more hesitant this year than any other year, just because March could be weird. We could see interest rates do different things. We could see inventory flux just because of a lot of the stuff going on. So. But typically, if you've been in this industry for several years, you've seen that every year we about see the same level of seasonality from November to March every year. So next one is your listing, which we talked about, and the seller needs out. I think at any time we have a listing that's been sitting, which was more common years past than it is right now, lots of times the seller's situation, I mean, they're obviously keeping us apprised of their situation as the house is sitting on the market, but always be thinking about what that number is for you for your own listing. You know, if it's sitting on the market at 350 and the seller's starting to get desperate, I mean, it's okay to have that conversation with them that if you shave off all of the commission at 350, you'd be down to probably 325 at that point, and they might be netting 325. And so if you told them, I mean, for around 310, I would probably be the buyer, but you know, we're still $15,000 off from where we are right now. Lots of times it makes sense for you to purchase your own listing in a way that nobody else could, because nobody else has access to that 6% or to that 5% or whatever the commission is. And so I think it's always important to think about on your own listing that you have a better shot at making money on that house than any other buyer or any other broker does. So, but that commission is not your money at that point to live on. I mean, that is your investment. That is your deal. So, that's a pretty unique piece about being in this industry that we actually have. I mean, we have like this built-in automatic discount. Anything we buy, for the most part, we can either get a very large discount on, or we can get cash to reinvest in the property for part of the flip. So I think that's something that we always have to keep in mind. And you're probably hearing the same thing come up over and over again, is that one of the best ways to invest in real estate is to take listings. So have you heard me say that yet? A partner of mine has done a couple of these next ones. I haven't done as many of these, but an owner finance flip that he did, and him and his wife have moved into 2 of them. But lots of times sellers are willing to carry the note for the right terms that you can then essentially go remodel and flip and sell on your own. And so sometimes people might say, I don't have the ability to finance my own property right now. We're not seeing as much of it now because sellers are not as desperate, but if the market starts to turn, we're going to see more owner occupied or owner finance opportunities where a seller is willing to carry that note for the right situation. So let's move on to financing some of these opportunities, because I think that's usually the biggest hurdle we run into. That's usually the biggest objection I hear is, what about the money for doing a project? So if you currently own a home, I don't know that there's a better opportunity or a better access to cash than a HELOC on your own property. I think that everybody should always have a HELOC open on their own property, and hopefully they bought it for a good enough price that they have equity in that house and they can open a home equity line of credit in case you need to tap into some cash for a purchase. And so depending on the size of your HELOC, you might be able to buy something with that, but more than likely it's probably just going to be a down payment. So most banks will let you, most banks have tightened them up now. And so they would now maybe want you to keep 80% value in that home. Historically, we've done ours through First Bank here in town, and First Bank would let you go to 90% loan to value for your HELOC. So let's pretend I owned a home that had, I don't know, I put 20% down when I bought it, and now the equity is 30%, let's say, because it's a $500,000 house, let's pretend, and I owe $350 on it, which would be 30%. And so what First Bank would allow you to do is to take 20% of that equity out in the form of a HELOC, which would be $100,000 in this scenario, and they'd make us keep $50,000 in as far as to not go past that 90% loan to value. And so that $100,000 then that I have access to could be used as a down payment on a property. It could be used as the funds to do a flip if it's something I think I could do relatively quickly. I don't know if it's because I'm nervous or scared, but I typically stay away from big projects, and I'm sure you can make more money on them. I would just rather have the quick, easy carpet, paint, front door, countertops. All of these are things that I have people that can do super cheap, and they all cost significantly less than people think they do. And they go significantly farther than people think they do. So We've all seen those houses that if they just got those 3 or 4 things, it would be complete game changer. Maybe landscaping also. I just love the easy ones like that. I would love to drop 10 grand into a house and sell it for 40 more than drop 100 grand into a house and sell it for 140 more or 150 more. The diminishing return is strong. I mean, the more you put in, I'm sure there's exceptions, but so that HELOC I think is a great place to start just by if you're going to finance the property. So one of the more expensive routes to go, which if you are personally purchasing this property that you locked down from that listing appointment we talked about, you're probably, if you don't have the cash available, you're probably going to have to go find hard money to do it. And hard money can be expensive. And so you're buying a property with hard money and then you're refinancing out of it once you either get a renter in there or once you sell the property that's been flipped. And that's another reason why I love the quick stuff, because you're not sitting on it for 2, 3, 4 months. Investors are really worried about buying flips right now, just because who knows by the time you finish the project where the market's going to be. And so if you're buying something as the market starts trending down, I mean, your profits are going away every single day. So hard money is definitely going to be one of your next best bets. I've done some through traditional financing. Lots of sellers are still willing to accept that, especially if you're finding the property off market. And so most lenders are able to close on a traditional financed property in 20 to 25 days right now, as long as they're ordering appraisal day 1, which you need to make sure your lender is ordering appraisal day 1, whether you're buying it for you or you're helping a client purchase. And so traditional financing, they're going to want you to put 25% down if it's not a second home. But if you're buying something like an Airbnb property that you could technically call a second home, they'll let you put less down. But don't rule that out. I mean, if you find an opportunity, I always tell people finding the opportunity is the hard part. Don't avoid looking for an opportunity because you don't necessarily have the finances figured out. And I promise you, if you go identify a great opportunity, the money will show up somehow. Or you'll go roll another partner in and the two of you together will do it and you'll bring no money and they'll bring the money and you'll have the opportunity. And I mean, come tap my shoulder. If you find a great opportunity and you don't know what to do with it, somebody will help you take advantage of it so that you both win, I promise. But most often what I see people is to not want to pursue the opportunities because they don't necessarily have the financial piece figured out. So obviously if you're doing it owner occupied, like we've done a bunch of times, you're putting as little down as you have to. And so putting 3% down, doing the work, then refinancing out of it, or keeping the loan for 2 years and selling it tax-free and just, paying the higher interest and paying the mortgage insurance along the way. And then I think our model for the longest time was, we probably did this 3 in a row. This wasn't the first couple we had to sell to move on to the next, but actually, hang on, I'll get to that in a second. So buying it, fixing it up, making it what you wanted it, finding your tenant then. So we've moved into it at this point. Then we go find our tenant and they move in and they sign a lease that's insanely high because that's what happens in Denver right now, which frees us up then to go find the next property. And it's not loan fraud because we bought it and moved into it. And so what I've had a couple of people ask is, isn't that loan fraud if you buy a property owner occupied and then you turn it into a rental? And so we did this 3 times in a row. And the third time it was pretty short. It was less than a year. And a lender required us to sign some paper like testifying that we were not buying this as a rental, and if we did rent it, they were going to come sue us or something like that. So you got to be a little careful with this one. But lots of times when we're buying an owner-occupied property, fixing it up, it's kind of opposite of the BRRRR method, which is the buy, renovate, refinance, rent model, because we're actually living in it. We're owner-occupying this property for a season, and then we're finding our tenant. We did that 3 times in a row, and then you wake up after 3 times and you've used your equity from one to go buy the next one and then the next one. And then they were all cash flowing well. And we were in our forever house, which for us was 2.5 years. And the other ones were cash flowing well. So for a lot of people, the way to acquire that rental is not to stay in your current house and go purchase that rental, get a tenant and get up and running. It's to turn the current one into the rental and then move on to the next one, as long as the current one makes sense for a rental. So that would be an owner occupied kind of reverse BRRRR model. So let me pivot to one more thing, and that's a business building strategy, I think, that would help you build a great real estate sales business that would also open up opportunities for you to be investing in real estate at the same time. And we'll spend 5-10 minutes on that right now, and then we'll open it up for questions. And I'm sure we could talk more about the itching questions that you have or thoughts that you have, more so than just this stuff that I'm vomiting right now. But I don't think there's a better way for anybody to start building a great real estate business and to start investing in real estate than to go start identifying opportunities, either for them or for somebody else. And so if you wanted to go find investment opportunities right now, one of the best places you could go would be people that have missed a mortgage payment, or out of town landlords. Out of town landlords are pretty frustrated right now that they can't evict anybody, and they also can't collect rent on a lot of properties. Probate sales. I mean, no matter what happens with the economy and with pandemics and things like that, there's always going to be probate sales and people that live in other states that they need to sell a property. Distressed, just general distressed properties in a neighborhood that we could knock or call or whatever. High sell scores. If you look at some areas like some programs like Remine has a high sell score feature. There's other things we've used in the past that sort of identify who a potential seller would be. And the message to these people is pretty simple. It's, hey, I represent an investor that would love to purchase a home in your neighborhood, and they'd be paying cash. They'd be closing quickly. They might even be able to let you stay in the property after you close, or to the out of town landlord, they might be able to, the tenant could stay, the lease would obviously survive the purchase. And so would you be interested in selling your home? Back up. This investor is willing to pay probably more than the house is worth right now to let you purchase, to let you stay in the home, move on, yada, yada, yada. The question for them usually is going to be, would you actually consider selling for the right price right now? Obviously, we're a roundabout way saying, looking in the neighborhood, willing to pay X dollars or the top dollar more than the house is worth. Buyers are willing to pay more than houses are worth right now. That's just the reality. And so we're identifying people that raise their hand and would say, yeah, I would consider that. I mean, let's talk about it. And so we're setting an appointment saying, well, let me come over and see it. I'll give you two prices when I'm there. I'll tell you, what we could sell it for when it goes in the market. And then I'll tell you what the cash quick close offer would be, or what the quick sale offer, or whatever the thing is. And depending on which way I'm going, which way I think that I want it to go, I mean, I might tweak the numbers. And so if I would say, I don't have any interest in buying this property, I mean, this is not something that I would be interested in buying, but I would gladly list it. I'm probably going to not offer them nearly as much on the cash side. I probably wouldn't say, it's $400,000 on the market, and so I'll give you 360. I mean, I'm probably going to get stuck with it at that price. I might be telling them more like 300. But if it's something that I really want to buy, I mean, obviously I can adjust the number that I or an investor would be willing to pay for it. So it's going into that appointment with the willingness and the preparedness to give them two numbers. But anybody on any listing appointment can go in prepared to do that. So we're starting with building in a list of investors, though, that could take these deals. And so I'm going to a few investors that I know or that have raised their hands. You would probably get emails from them all the time, right? Saying, do you have any off-market deals? There's a couple of institutional investors that I could connect you with that you could always put on the list. And I've got to have at least somewhat of a list to take these deals to. Because when I go into a property, I don't want to just be looking for me. I want to be looking for lots of people so that if I don't want the thing, I actually can still do something with it. So, than we're seeing right now. But anybody that's behind on a mortgage payment, over 10% of all government-backed mortgages were in, my internet connection is unstable. We're in forbearance. I mean, there's people that are not going to be able to catch up on being behind on their properties. We had one in Lakewood recently that she lost her job and she had a lot of equity in her house, but she didn't have the ability to go buy something else because she didn't have a job anymore. And she was foreseeing 3, 6, 9 months of no income. So it just made more sense for her to just sell it and go rent for now. The reasons people would take you up on something like this are all over the board. But I'm just beginning to prospect for properties at that point. And then I'm preparing to go into that appointment with the options to give them. And then I'm deciding the same questions we started with. So is this something I want to buy? Is this something I want to control to go help somebody else and I just make the money on the other side? Most likely with this group, the most common response is going to be, I want to list this. And so the numbers you might be giving, they might make it obvious that their best bet is going to be listing it. And so you'd be saying, I think you can honestly get a lot more on the market than I could give you for it. So yeah, I'd give you 325, which is decent, but I think we could probably get you 4 or maybe more on the market. So let's just list the thing. And so you might go looking for investment properties and accidentally get some listings in the process, which is not a bad deal either. But And then we're just deciding at that point if we do find opportunities we want to take advantage of, how can we finance them? How can we make them work? So that was a lot of stuff, and I'm kind of tired of talking. And so let's do some Q&A. Let's talk about what kind of stuff stood out to you in that you maybe had questions about, or you wondering how it works, or how could you put that kind of deal together, or what. I won't even throw out sample questions. I'll save sample questions until it gets silent and nobody asks any questions. So who wants to go first?
I have a question.
Oh,
Either
Go
Brinkley or
ahead.
Denise. Who's taking it? Brinkley, looks like it's you. She went on mute.
All right. My question is, how do you time the market? Because in the presentation, you mentioned that you sell every, the longest was 2.5 years. Some are sooner than 18 months. How do you time the market when you do an owner-occupied approach?
Totally. So, I mean, if I'm living in it for 2 years, I really can't time the market in that case. I mean, I'm just seeing what the market is doing in that time, and then it just makes sense to move on at that point. You might end up getting stuck in one. I mean, you might buy a house intending on selling it 2 years later, and then 20 years later, you're still in the same house. I don't know that that's necessarily the right strategy going into it. I think that it's more of a response after 2 years that says, I'm going to start looking for the next deal and move on. We can't bank on the market continuing to do what it's done for the last 10 years that we've been playing this game. I mean, that's just not realistic. I mean, we'll see another 7 years of down relatively soon here. So, with the owner occupied situation, I mean, I wouldn't bet on all of that. But.
I want to share a concept around that if I can, Dave, from both books, The Millionaire Real Estate Shift and The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. In Shift, they talk about how to have conversations with your buyers or sellers about timing of the market. Your buyers who are like, oh, a bubble is coming. I want to go ahead and wait until everything dies down and prices are lower. Or sellers who are like, I think the market's going to go up. I want to wait. And the conversation in Shift is essentially nobody can time the market. Nobody knows when that shift is going to occur. By the time we realize, oh, we're shifting, it's usually too late and the buyer or seller has already missed out on the cap. You can't time the market. And so that would be the first thing that I would say is you can't time the market. The second thing that I would say, and again, I am no Dave Umphress and I am no investor yet. But learning from the Millionaire Real Estate Investor, one of the conversations that they have in the book is that you're not going to be able to time the market. You're not going to wake up one day and go, okay, it's now the market for me to go find an investment. When you choose to start investing in real estate, you have to constantly be in the market looking for a great deal. So it's never, I'm going to jump in because now feels like the right time. It's, I'm always actively looking for a great deal. And when that great deal shows up, I have such clarity on what my criteria is that I can go, yes, that's a great deal. We're going to make it happen.
Totally. Yeah. You usually don't have a whole lot of time to decide on these deals either. And a lot of people want, 2-3 days to think about it. And if you're not ready for it, you're not going to get it. But I do think, kind of piggybacking on what Ashley just shared, the value that I can bring to clients because I'm in the market finding deals is substantial. And so even if I don't buy it, if I just take the opportunity to somebody else, I mean, the different couple in Arvada, but we a couple of weeks ago closed on another couple that they bought their first house for $260 in Arvada. They could never have bought a single family home for $260 in Arvada 3 years ago when they bought. But I had found a great deal. I was working with this couple and I was like, you guys should just do this. And so they bought it instead of me. They sold it a couple days ago or a couple weeks ago for mid-4s. I forgot where. This is not the same couple from earlier. It's a different numbers in Arvada must all be the same. And they moved back home to Wisconsin and they took $220,000 in cash with them that they never had before. But the only reason they were able to change the rest of their lives financially and probably generationally change the next generation's lives with that cash was because I happen to be touching deals. And so I think all of us owe it to our clients and our potential clients and our future clients to be touching potential deals that we could also bring to them. So it's not always just about finding deals that we can take. It's also about bringing value. And I mean, I think when we're meeting with a buyer client and telling them, one of the reasons you should hire me, Mr. Buyer, is because I spend X amount of hours a week prospecting for opportunities for my buyers. that's a great reason to hire you. You know, that's a great reason for you to be picking up the phone, calling through a neighborhood saying, I've got these buyers who would love to live in the neighborhood. Do you know anybody that would consider selling? So what else? Let's see if Bernice is still on here. She was starting to ask a question, I think.
Yes, my question was, you mentioned owner will carry. I wouldn't know how that works. Would the property have to be paid off in order for the owner to carry the new loan being made to the buyer, or how do you know how that would work?
It's a good question. So most attorneys would say yes. A coach of mine would say no, and he does a ton of these. I get very nervous about those kinds of deals where you're essentially the lender could call that note at any time if they wanted to. So if we move forward in some kind of deal where you're still carrying a note or you're still carrying a mortgage, and I am now on a second note with you, if the lender found out about that, they could say, okay, the deal's due, the loan is due. I'm not familiar with those enough to say though. And so
Right.
I would just say, if you're trying to put together some sort of owner carry thing, get an attorney involved. I've got a couple good attorneys you could talk to. Gabe Gelman at Gelman and Norberg is great. Don't talk to Damien in our office. That's not really his thing, but so.
And that was my next question. How could you go about doing that? So you just would talk to an attorney to get the terms in place and then sign an agreement with your buyer?
So that's getting kind of complicated. So you're saying you would be brokering the deal. Your buyer is purchasing an owner carry property. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So my question would be, like, let's say that I buy a house, right? And I have a buyer, but I'll finance it for them. That's why the first question was asked. If there was a mortgage, could I do that? And if there wasn't a mortgage, then how could I finance it to them by me being the bank, essentially?
Yeah. So I mean, if there's not a mortgage, it's easy. And so you're just writing up, you're essentially drafting up your own loan docs. You're having an attorney draft up your loan docs where you are the lender for them. That is very, very far above my pay grade though. And so I don't even want to suggest an answer that's going to get one of us sued probably. If it comes to that,
Thank you.
let's talk about it, and we'll roll somebody else in that knows more than me. But
I want to piggyback off that concept, Dave. Bernice, this may help answer some of your questions. I was speaking with one of the agents at Keller Williams who he owns 50 doors right now. And I said, my husband and I, we really want to get into investing in real estate, but it's scary. Like, we're nervous of the risk, right? And he said, well, yeah, your first job is to eliminate the risk or lower the risk as much as possible. And he said, here are the three pieces of advice I have for you on how to lower your risk when investing in real estate. I see all of you guys pulling out pens. I did the same exact thing. He said, number one, hire a CPA. Because when you look at tax law, there's about 2 or 3 pages that tells you how you need to pay taxes. And there's about 1,000 other pages that tell you how not to pay the taxes. Mm-hmm. And so hire a CPA because they know the 1,000 other pages, and you don't have to be the expert in it. Your CPA will give you back more money than you invest in them. They are one of your best investments as an investor real estate agent. Hire a CPA. Number 2, hire a great attorney. Find a great attorney that is going to do all of the hard work to limit your risk, to protect you in all of your contracts. And if you guys are interested in a great attorney, I can get that attorney from him. That attorney is $500 a year. Every year you get access to all of that attorney's contracts. So all the lease agreements, all the stuff that's going on with COVID right now and how to be a landlord during all of that information that attorney has resources to that, and training. That attorney offers trainings to you as an investor and as a landlord. And then of course you would hire him if we had to do any, use him for any concerns. If anything came up as a landlord, you could hire him hourly. And the third piece of advice that he said is obviously create a business around it. So choose if you want to do an S Corp, an LLC, talk with your CPA about it, and make sure that when you are running an investment business, that it truly is its own business entity and is treated like a business. Money is going into the business, money is going out of the business. You're not buying your groceries with your investment real estate business. You are truly using it as a business, because as a business, the chances of you actually being, he said, you're going to get sued. Like you will, I don't want to scare anybody, but he said anybody can sue anybody for any reason. But when you choose, it's a lot harder to win when you're suing a business. And so he said, treat it as a business, put all of your money in the business, and then you're going to protect yourself from actually having any legal issues. He said, if you get sued as a individual, it's a lot easier to not win. So those are the 3 pieces of advice: hire a CPA, hire an attorney, become an LLC or an S Corp, whatever your CPA recommends.
Totally. And so it sounds like that guy almost exclusively does buy and holds, where you're purchasing a property and keeping it as a rental for the long term. And what you're going to do with the property definitely changes structure. And so what you should, also who you own it with. I mean, don't think so narrowly that it has to be just you doing this alone. I mean, several properties I've done have been with other people. Maybe it's somebody that I'm in business with that I want to do something with, or maybe it's friends that want to do similar things. I mean, this doesn't have to just be you alone. And so in those, you definitely want to have operating under an LLC or something. So what other thoughts or questions or ideas or thoughts on how you can structure different things? Or yes, Joni.
I've kind of taken a different approach to real estate investing, and it's almost like you buy a townhome and just basically let them pay off the mortgage. So then you're kind of in it for the long run, but if you can do it right, you get your cash at the end of 10 years, 15 years, whatever, and you basically had just your down payment and somebody else paid off your mortgage for you. And it can go a lot faster if you're doing it short-term rentals.
Okay, yeah. So the short-term rental conversation we haven't really gotten into, but are you saying you get somebody in there as a tenant yearly, or are you saying you buy it as a short-term rental?
Either one. I've done both.
Totally. I mean, I don't think there's a much better investment opportunity in the market right now than short-term rentals. I think
in a vacation area, it's insane.
For sure. I think the thing that concerns me, and I'm willing to roll the dice on it, we are rolling the dice on it, is that things could change overnight, right? Counties could instantly come up with some sort of new tax on short-term rentals, or they could outlaw them altogether. I mean, there's certainly more risk with a short-term rental, but the reward right now, the upside on a short-term rental is so significantly greater than a long-term rental that I think it's worth the risk, the potential risk. So.
I think if you research your areas and are in a county that relies, especially like in Florida, I do a lot in Florida, off of tourism, that's probably never going to happen, where they're going to ban an Airbnb or VRBO. That's a good market to research.
Totally. And so there's a program called AirDNA. You're probably familiar with, other people should look into it. It's called AirDNA, and it's a great way to research different areas and how viable they are for short-term rentals. What they evaluate not only, it's largely based on purchase price compared to average rental of that nightly rental in that area. And it's going to evaluate all different counties and areas and neighborhoods on how great of a short-term rental potential there is. But it's also going to give you an idea of everything else around there, what's being rented, what the key features are, what features are causing it to rent for more than other houses are. It's a great place to start if you want to start to dig into short-term rental stuff. But
Joni, I have to ask you, are you in one of your Florida rentals right now? Because your skin looks beautiful.
No, I'm sitting in my kitchen. You can probably see all the dead animals on my wall in the back, but we somehow ended up with a mountain goat, a full-size one, in our living room.
Nice.
Less than thrilled with it, but it's here to stay apparently.
Nice.
My office is really dark, so I decided I was going to sit in the kitchen today.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely think the short-term rental, there should probably be a whole separate class talking specifically about the investment opportunity in a short-term rental, but I think everybody should at least be open to that right now. So, and you're right, you can pay it off a lot quicker. I mean, you can pay off a single-family home rented yearly in that 30 years, maybe 20, if you're really cash flowing well. But a short-term rental, you could probably pay off 10 to 15, like you said.
Yep.
So what else?
I have a question, Dave.
Yeah.
So in your experience, because you've done a lot of different ways, what do you find to be the easiest and the most lucrative, holding properties to rent, or how you're explaining like snowballing, like get in, get out and resell it in 2 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think some of it depends on the market we're in, of course. I do think that the seasonal flip or the lipstick flip every year, just doing a from September to December, looking for a slightly distressed property that I can pick up before Christmas and spend a month or two putting some effort into. I mean, if I buy a property in December, when's my first payment due? Like February 1st, probably. And hopefully by then it's actually coming back on the market anyways, and it's fixed up and ready to go. I don't think you can do much better than every year or every couple of years doing one of those for a $20, $30, $50,000 profit without a whole lot of effort. And if somebody, and the beauty of it is, I mean, if this thing is sitting on the market this time of year, people are starting to drop prices, we can just go fire offers at tons of them, right? And I mean, I can, my wife probably gets sick of me sending every week or so, there's something else. It's like, what about this one? Look at this one. And it's usually something that's been sitting. I mean, when I'm looking on the MLS, I always sort by price reduction. And so the whole last 7 days, what's had price reductions in the last 7 days, I love that stuff because it's usually people that are just starting to get a little desperate. And I mean, I'm not going to have my feelings hurt if we offer 10 properties and they all 10 get rejected. If it's a buyer that wants to do that, I'm probably not going to waste a whole lot of time with that buyer. But if it's me doing it, I'll waste time with me. And so, I mean, I think I would do that every year of just taking a season and just taking shots at, lower priced stuff. This is a tough market right now. I mean, we were in the toughest market in Denver history in September, and October wasn't a whole lot better. And so it's a tough time in life to be looking at great buyer opportunities, right? And so a little bit of this is based on years past and not necessarily just on this year. But to answer the question a little more, though, I mean, I do think that a close second, or maybe even still a first with best opportunities right now, though, would be something that I'm continually moving from. Like, I don't know that there's ever going to be a reason to stay in a place long term if I'm buying it right, because I'm not going to realize that gain on it until I move on to the next one. And so I just love the idea that there are very few tax loopholes that allow me to make that kind of money tax free, like in owner occupied real estate. And I don't think it stays like that for a whole lot longer. I think that loophole in the next 5-10 years is probably going to go away or get much more limited with the amount of gain that you can take away without paying any tax on it. So
What if you don't want to move every 2 years? Would you finance it and like?
I think that you should not talk to my wife because she might start to believe you. That's definitely a challenge. I mean, I agree that we have 3 kids under 4 now. And so it's like, it's becoming more of a challenge now for sure.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, if that was the reality, I think finding a way to be able to do that one investment a year for something that you could do a quick, easy lipstick flip would probably be your best bet. So,
okay.
But I mean, some of the best stuff that we've had in the past has been tenant occupied properties that we kept for 3-4 years and then sold. So they doubled in value and they cash flowed 3 or 4 years. So historically that's been the best for us, but you just can't necessarily bank on that. Over time, any piece of real estate you buy today is going to be worth more 20 years from now, hands down. But we just don't know what it's going to do in the next 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. So most investors look for at least $500 a month in cash flow for it to make sense to them, for it to be worth their time. And so, in Denver, that's a little bit of a challenge with where our purchase prices are. So if you're buying a property that has a $2,000 a month mortgage payment to get $2,500 a month in rents, plus expenses, so maybe more than $2,500 a month, might be a little bit of a challenge, but the opportunities are out there. I think we typically avoid anything with an HOA because it just cuts into that cash flow like crazy, unless it's a short-term rental that is, covering that expense. So
I missed the part that you talked about using your HELOC. How did you use that to finance a secondary home instead of a secondary home mortgage?
Yeah, that was the down payment. So we've used
okay.
as the down payment several times, and the rates on a HELOC are not great. I mean, you're definitely paying for that money, and so you don't want to necessarily keep it there for a long time. It's a great way if you're gonna flip something in a 4 month span. You can pay that HELOC payment. It's an interest only payment, so $50,000 HELOC might be $700-800 a month, which is probably more like $400 or $500 a month. I'd say around 5 probably, which is not crazy, but you're not going to want to do that for too long because that's not decreasing your principal at all. I mean, that's just going to interest. So that, I mean, we've used that strategy if we're actually financing a flip. And so if we're buying it as an investment property, that we had to put 25% down. And so that's why we have to come up with that kind of down payment. And some hard money lenders are going to want you to come up with some down payment. Lots of them don't require it, but they're going to hit you with more higher interest rate. So I'd say avoid hard money if you can, though. I mean, that's expensive money.
All right, thank you.
Of course. I think one of your best, like, this is not everybody's potential or possibility, but if you ever came across somebody that had money they wanted to invest in real estate and working out some sort of partnership with them that said, why don't I find the deals, you finance the deals, and we will split the profit on them, that's going to be one of your best paths forward if you can find somebody like that, because the money's going to be a lot cheaper and you're going to have some shared equity in the property. You're going to have some shared risk in the property. And for the first couple to knock out on your own, that can be a great way to go about it. But hopefully we talked about 10 different things here, and hopefully all it's done is just expanded your thinking a little bit on what types of opportunities are out there, so that you're looking a little more broadly and it's not so narrow as, I got to come up with cash, I got to buy it and flip it, I've got to sell it, quickly. So there are so many ways to put these deals together if you find the right opportunity. And if you find the right opportunity, just reach out to me and say, hey, I found a deal and I don't really know how to take advantage of it. What do I do? I will ask you lots of questions to help you think about different things you could do with it.
So it sounds like to get everything started, the best thing to do is try and do the seasonal ones and snowball the income, right? Because you can't, unless your income is really robust right away, you can't hold properties and do all those things from the get-go, right?
Yeah, I would say that is one of your best ways to start, but I also think, depending on where you're starting, one of your other best ways to start is going to be finding the deals. The person finding the deals has all the power. And so you have the power to list it and make money. You have the power to wholesale it and make money. You have the power to buy it yourself and eventually make money. And so a lot of people, when they're first getting started in real estate, they're just going to want to source 4 or 5 deals just to build some cash. Or because you all work in real estate sales, you could have 6 months of lots of sales where you build cash and you still live meager and you create a nest egg to invest. But yeah, I definitely think one of the best things you can do to get started, other than that, which you'd have to have some cash for, would be to start finding deals. And you could come to this group and probably half the people in this group would pay you $10,000 to $15,000 finder's fee for the right deal. But I think, like we said at the beginning, finding that investor group and adding investors to it that would buy deals when you found them is a great place to start too, because you're going to want to have somebody to source these to when you find them. Other questions, other thoughts? I can't believe we went to 5. That actually surprises me. But
I as well have, when you guys find these great deals and you go, what do I do with this? I don't have the cash, I need an investor. Like, I also have some people in my pocket that I can connect you with as well.
Totally. Finding the people to buy the deal will happen. Just worry about finding it right now. Ashley and I will help you find investors that want it. But in a perfect world, once you find the deal, you're doing a quick walkthrough with a camera and showing the deal, and you're sending the video to 20 investors and you're saying, this property is under contract for $280,000. The first person that gets me earnest money for a $300,000 purchase, it's yours. And within 48 hours, somebody else is locking it down for $300,000 and you're taking that $20,000 finder's fee. They're taking over the contract and you're out. You're getting paid at closing. That is a straight wholesale, and that is a completely different thing than we've talked about. But I think that's also one of your best bets once you find the deal. It is 5. We should end. Thank you all for being here. Let's make this an ongoing conversation about what we could be doing, and hopefully we are seeing more and more opportunities this next year than we're seeing right now. But somebody tell me if you find a good opportunity in the next month and it closes like December 26th or around there, tell me about it, because I think a lot of you that want to could probably go find some good stuff. This spring is going to be crazy. I promise you that. Barring some worldwide meltdown, if anything you buy in December, you will be able to sell for a lot more in March. Beyond March, I can't make any gambles. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you, Dave.